Secretary Hegseth and Senator Coons just clashed in an explosive Senate showdown regarding a stalled commercial waterway, leaving the most crucial question about your daily gas prices completely unanswered. Every American needs to see the real, unfiltered footage that is about to air. Secretary Hegseth faced an incredibly intense and grueling line of questioning from Senator Coons over the closed Strait of Hormuz, and it quickly became apparent that this debate wasn't just about international shipping routes. Watch closely what happens when Senator Coons firmly looks at the secretary and says, "I am not your enemy." Make sure to stick around for the critical, unanswered question at the very end of this exchange. Senator Coons opened the floor by plainly stating his critical assessment of the conflict. "In my assessment, there was no imminent threat to the United States that justified the president using his Article 2 powers." Coons declared, arguing further that there was insufficient preparation to ensure the right troops and the right capabilities were effectively deployed. He reminded the hearing room that there used to be a firm consensus in national security circles. America, he argued, should only go to war when facing an imminent threat to national security, when all other diplomatic options have been completely exhausted, and when there are clear objectives alongside a concrete plan for how the conflict ends. Coons acknowledged that, as General Keane testified, the military was given 3 clear goals: sink the opposing navy, attack and destroy the ballistic missile launchers, and heavily degrade their defense industrial base. He conceded that the armed forces successfully accomplished those exact missions. Yet, he noted that President Trump celebrated a regime change, despite previously stating that regime change was the actual real goal. Furthermore, Coons pointed out that NATO allies had delivered crucial support. They allowed overflight and projection of force despite not being officially consulted. Addressing Secretary Hegseth directly, Coons highlighted a glaring operational contradiction. While the secretary claimed just moments prior that the United States controls the strait, the reality of reopening the Strait of Hormuz for commercial traffic continuously eludes us. Coons argued this failure is largely due in no small part to the fact that Iran retains a robust stockpile of cheap, highly lethal Shahed drones. Worse yet, they are actively getting assistance from our adversaries to rebuild those stockpiles. When Coons bluntly asked for the secretary's specific plan for reopening the Strait of Hormuz, Hegseth fired back defensively. "I would just note that the majority of your question was highly disingenuous and loaded with suggestions that I very much don't agree with. From the beginning," Secretary Hegseth replied. Coons calmly interjected, inviting the secretary to pick any one of those points to address. Hegseth continued by emphasizing that the administration has been exceptionally clear from the beginning about the military objectives and the underlying strategic goal, which is entirely focused on preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. He passionately defended the military success, noting that before this conflict started, the Iranian conventional navy possessed aircraft carriers loaded with Shahed drones, as well as full-on destroyers and battleship capabilities. None of those major assets exist anymore. To clarify the specifics, Hegseth stated the Iranian Navy had utilized 3 drone aircraft carriers, 11 platforms for drones, and 11 regular Navy submarines, all of which have been neutralized. He acknowledged that Iran retains its traditional fast boat capabilities, but assured the committee that the U.S. military understands this threat, can control for it, and absolutely will. Hegseth proudly declared the almost complete degradation of Iran's defense industrial-based capabilities. He argued that a nation's ability to terrorize or hold an area at issue with piracy does not equate to controlling it, a point he has reiterated at the Pentagon podium time and time again. According to the secretary, the United States controls what goes in and out and controls whether or not it is necessary to restart conflict. The president holds that authority as well. This marked the beginning of the most intense part of the video. Despite securing operational goals and rendering naval capacities inoperable, the commercial waterway remained completely stalled, setting a notably heavy tone for the room. Senator Coons, however, was far from finished. Shifting away from operational summaries, Coons focused on the most serious question in the room: the real-world consequences. Hegseth maintained that the United States will manage where the situation goes in the future, severely limiting Iran's ability to set the tempo or respond to it. This dynamic, he argued, provides the president a vast array of options to ensure Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. Unconvinced, Coons pressed further, stating that the connection between Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz with fast boats and Shahed drones and the broadly shared strategic goal of preventing a usable nuclear weapon remained utterly unclear to him. As Coons repeated his pressing question regarding the specific plan for reopening the Strait of Hormuz to commercial traffic, Hegseth fiercely interrupted. The secretary criticized previous administrations, claiming they shared the goal but never executed it because they lacked the willingness to actually do what it would take. He praised President Trump for making the courageous decision to strike Iran's conventional umbrella and shield during their weakest moments following the 1-2-day war. This shield, Hegseth noted, was being used to heavily protect their nuclear program, which the administration knew came with complex threats, branches, and sequels. Senator Coons expressed deep concern that the administration had achieved a series of tactical successes, but was now on the verge of a strategic loss because of current negotiations. Hegseth immediately fired back, dismissing the entire assessment. "I just think it's so foolish," Hegseth stated. He expressed utter disbelief that 74 days into a United States Senate committee hearing, a strategic loss was being discussed, despite the ability to defeat a 7-year threat of a pursuit of a nuclear weapon. Hegseth emphasized that the U.S. holds more leverage than ever before following incredible battlefield successes, repeatedly accusing the senator of asking disingenuous questions. As the men talked over each other, Hegseth accused Coons of undercutting efforts that could otherwise be highly effective. Holding his ground, Coons firmly stated, "I am not your enemy, sir. I am not your adversary," he continued, reiterating his shared goal of preventing Iran from ever having a usable nuclear weapon. However, to finish his sentence, Coons stressed that the control of the Strait of Hormuz, the ability to degrade Allied gas and oil production capabilities through cheap drones, and the power to harass commercial shipping remains firmly in Iran's hands. Iran continues to demand recognized sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, a demand Coons believes the president has rejected, Hegseth has rejected, and Coons himself actively rejects. The fundamental question persisted. If the United States truly controls the strait, how do we reopen it? Coons emphasized that the average American is seeing the massive cost of this failure at the gas pump every single day. That unanswered question about the Strait of Hormuz isn't just standard Washington politics. While we pull up the exact numbers showing how this completely missing plan directly impacts American gas prices, let me know where you currently stand. Who made the strong, more compelling point in this fierce debate, the senator or the secretary? Drop your comment below, because the harsh financial reality they completely failed to mention in that room is coming up right now. Coons fully knew this economic reality when he asked the question. That was not a politician seeking attention. That was a senator explicitly naming a concrete, measurable problem that intimately connects overseas operations directly to the daily financial lives of ordinary Americans. The connection that Coons said was utterly unclear to him was not between the nuclear goal and the military actions. He readily accepted those actions as highly accomplished. What remained unclear was the vital bridge between achieving a tactical victory and reaching the moment when a massive cargo ship can once again move freely through that water without being endlessly harassed by a drone swarm launched from a simple fast boat on the Iranian coast. Hegseth's response to that specific challenge was to point directly to what had been rendered entirely inoperable, and the massive losses Iran sustained were undoubtedly real. Iran's conventional naval capacity before the 1-2-day operation included what the Pentagon officially classified as 3 drone-carrying vessels, 11 submarines, and an extensive network of surface combatants. Those are no longer operational today. The overarching defense industrial base that built and maintained those massive vessels has been significantly degraded. Hegseth was not wrong about any of those established facts. The problem Senator Coons was desperately pointing at is what currently remains. The Shahed drone is a highly effective, one-way aerial system. It is incredibly inexpensive to produce, extraordinarily easy to stockpile, and crucially, it does not require a massive destroyer or a submarine to launch. It can be rapidly deployed from a small vehicle, a basic coastal vessel, or even a fixed shoreline position. Iran has been aggressively manufacturing Shaheds since at least 2021, and reportedly does so at a blistering pace that makes attrition-based degradation extremely difficult to achieve. Neutralizing a specific production facility only slows output, it certainly does not eliminate the existing massive inventory. Furthermore, Coons explicitly noted on the record that Iran was receiving direct assistance from adversaries in rebuilding that dangerous capacity. That is a direct, undeniable reference to Russian and Chinese technical material support, which has been heavily documented in open source intelligence reporting throughout all of 2024 and well into 2025. So here is the specific glaring gap Coons was circling. The U.S. military brilliantly rendered the large naval platforms inoperable, yet Iran still has the vast inventory and the fierce motivation to use it against vital commercial shipping. Fast boats operating from hidden coastal positions do not require a fully functioning navy. They simply require coastline, fuel, and operators. Iran has all three in abundance. That harsh reality is exactly what makes Hegseth's bold claim that the U.S. controls what goes in and out deeply complicated in actual practice. Control, in a strict military sense, means having the total ability to deny the adversary freedom of action. But preventing a rogue state actor from occasionally disrupting a massive tanker with an inexpensive disposable drone is an entirely different operational problem than disabling a large naval vessel. That critical distinction matters enormously, and it simply did not get resolved in the hearing room today. What also went entirely unresolved, and what the camera clearly captured in the intense rhythm of the exchange, was the palpable tension between two men who were not actually disagreeing on the overarching strategic goal. Hegseth said it clearly, preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. Coons said it just as clearly. He thoroughly shares that goal. The deep disagreement was over whether the current moment, exactly 74 days into the operation, represented a position of genuine, lasting strength or a dangerous position of vulnerability dressed up as strength. Hegseth weaponized the word foolish to describe Coons raising the concept of strategic loss at this specific stage. That singular word landed exceptionally hard in the room. It is a word you do not often hear a high-ranking cabinet secretary direct at a sitting senator in a fully open hearing. It was not said quietly or as a passing aside. It was a direct, aggressive characterization, and Coons absolutely did not back down from it. He firmly held his ground, repeated his vital question 3 separate times, and then delivered the exact sentence that became the massive headline. "I am not your enemy, sir." That line was not just a clever rhetorical move, it was a profound correction. Hegseth had aggressively described Coons's questions as disingenuous at the very start of the exchange, long before a single factual dispute had even been established. He later doubled down, saying the questions were cloaked in disingenuous framing and that raising any doubts about the operation's strategic direction was exactly how you undercut efforts that could otherwise be very effective. The implication was overwhelmingly clear. A senator asking hard, necessary questions about the Strait of Hormuz was somehow causing damage to the military mission. Coons wholly rejected that dangerous framing directly and by name. He was not willing to let the vital hearing close with that damaging characterization standing unchallenged. The core reason that specific moment carried significantly more weight than most routine Senate hearing exchanges is that it was not partisan in the ordinary political sense. Coons was not maliciously challenging the military operation itself. He eagerly acknowledged the operational results explicitly, multiple times on the official record. He emphatically said correct when Hegseth listed exactly what had been rendered inoperable. He was not trying to endlessly relitigate the past decision to act. He was simply asking what happens next. The tactical success versus strategic question framework he expertly offered is absolutely not a partisan talking point. It is a foundational, standard framework in military doctrine going back decades. The critical distinction between achieving operational objectives and achieving long-term strategic objectives is deeply taught at every single level of professional military education. General McChrystal famously used it in Afghanistan. The Baker-Hamilton Commission extensively used it in Iraq. The vital question of whether tactical results actually add up to lasting strategic success is precisely the exact question that civilian oversight bodies like the Senate are constitutionally supposed to ask. That deep context matters significantly for understanding exactly why Coons kept rigorously pressing, even as Murkowski gently signaled that time was running out. He was not being needlessly difficult. He was doing the highly specific job the Senate oversight function specifically exists to do. When a sitting Secretary of Defense appears before the United States Senate and deliberately does not answer the fundamental question of how a major waterway critical to the entire global oil supply gets reopened, that is not a minor gap in testimony. That is the central operational question of the entire current moment, and the crucial answer was simply not given. This was not necessarily because Hegseth does not have a secret plan, but because the plan, if it truly exists, inherently involves complex negotiation with Iran. Hegseth referenced it obliquely when he heavily talked about leverage, boasting about having more leverage than ever, the ability to ensure Iran never gets a nuclear weapon, and the vast options currently available to the president. These phrases are the exact language of a negotiated diplomatic settlement, not a purely military one. No military operation alone organically reopens a contested strait that a hostile coastal state can easily threaten with cheap drone activity. That reality requires either a massively sustained military presence of overwhelming scale or a complex diplomatic agreement. Iran's stated demand, directly according to Coons' own framing during the hearing, was total recognition of Iranian sovereignty over the vital Strait of Hormuz. The U.S., the president, and Coons himself all completely rejected that. So the demand is inherently unacceptable, the strait is not open, and the massive financial cost of it not being open is aggressively reaching American consumers every single time they pull up to fill their gas tanks. That is the core bleeding issue that remained entirely unresolved in that historic room. There's a massive underlying question that the hearing largely missed, but was clearly present throughout the entire intense exchange. If the military objectives have been successfully achieved and the leverage is at its absolute maximum, then the next move is either highly diplomatic or it is another dangerous phase of escalating tension. Hegseth's carefully chosen language suggested the former without quite saying so directly. Coons' deep concern suggests the latter without quite predicting it fully. Neither man was ultimately willing to say, on the official record, what the actual next chapter truly looks like. That heavy, lingering ambiguity is the absolute most consequential thing to come out of this entire exchange. It is not the petty argument over who controls the strait, not the pedantic terminology dispute over drone aircraft carriers versus launch platforms for drones, and not even the incredibly sharp exchange over whether questioning a military operation 74 days in constitutes fatally undermining it. The truly consequential thing is that a United States senator directly asked the Secretary of Defense in an open public hearing for the exact plan to reopen one of the world's most important maritime choke points, and the answer was simply not provided. This heavily unresolved issue will continually impact future hearings, global markets, and complex international relations for the foreseeable future. How does a massive military operation that successfully achieves its stated tactical objectives ever translate into a stable, verifiable, and highly durable outcome when the adversary actively retains the capacity and the fierce motivation to continue causing disruption at a lower level indefinitely? That is absolutely not a partisan question. It is the ultimate hard question. And the stark fact that it went completely unanswered in that room is something incredibly worth paying close attention to, regardless of wherever you personally stand on how the operation itself should be judged. We will continue to aggressively track this vital story as it develops, because what happens behind these closed committee room doors eventually reaches your hometown and your wallet. Do you think Congress is actively doing enough right now to hold officials fully accountable for these massive economic impacts? Let me know your final unfiltered thoughts down in the comment section. If you truly value this kind of clear, unedited, and deep look into Washington politics, make sure to vigorously hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you in the very next video.